Hey everyone, I'm back with another video, and today we're going to be talking about the new Resident Evil 4 remake. Yeah. But before we get into that, let me just say, I don't really like Resident Evil. It's just not my type of game. I'm not really into survival horror and, the slow, shaky aiming and the lack of ammo, and not really a fan of the puzzles in it either. I tried playing Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 7, but I'm going to be responding to a video of a guy talking about why you shouldn't buy Resident Evil 4 Remake for really dumb reasons, honestly. Like, I don't even like Resident Evil, but I can recognize that this guy is making really bad arguments, and I can understand the appeal of Resident Evil, even though I don't personally like it. So this should be pretty interesting, so yeah, let's get straight into this, shall we?
Hello, welcome back to a new video review. So recently I've been playing the brand new Resident Evil 4 Remake, and as an avid fan of Resident Evil and horror games in general, I knew I just had to play this game.
Keep in mind that he says he's a fan of horror and Resident Evil games, because everything he says in this video completely contradicts that and makes me think that he never even played the Resident Evil game. I played Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 7. I didn't finish them because I didn't like them, but I at least tried the games and gave them a fair chance. So I somewhat understand Resident Evil, at least more than this guy, which is pretty sad to be honest, because I know like barely anything about Resident Evil. All I really know is that I don't like it.
Unfortunately, so far it's been a bit bland, boring, uninspired, and kind of lacking in luster. So as someone who really enjoyed the Resident Evil 2 and 3 and 1 remakes, I thought, okay, Resident Evil 4 remake, it's the same game as the original Resident Evil 4, but it's a remake, so obviously it's going to look better and play better, just like the other remakes have been quite enjoyable so far. Unfortunately, for some reason, I feel like they've kind of slipped the ball on this remake version. I don't know what it is about Resident Evil 4 that doesn't really feel the same, doesn't really have the same vibes or atmosphere as Resident Evil 1, 2, or 3.
Well, that's kind of a vague statement. Also kind of subjective. I mean, it looks like a Resident Evil game to me. Very dark, gritty, horror. Looks like a Resident Evil game to me, so I'm not really sure what you're expecting.
But it doesn't really feel or play like a Resident Evil game. Okay, it kind of looks like one. It's got a very similar control system, inventory system, and everything. But there's something about it that isn't very Resident Evil-y.
Again, that's a very vague and subjective statement. It's not very Resident Evil-y. What do you consider Resident Evil-y? Why did you say it like that? Why did you say Resident Evil-y? It just sounds weird. Also, it looks like it plays exactly like a Resident Evil game. I mean, it looks very similar to Resident Evil 2 Remake, except they added a few extra combat options, which Resident Evil 4 had. Like, I don't know what you're expecting. Did you even play Resident Evil 4? I haven't played Resident Evil 4, but I've watched other people play it, and it looks pretty faithful so far from the gameplay I've seen of the remake.
So as you know, the original Resident Evil games took place in or around Raccoon City, and there was a police station, a scary mansion, and basically Resident Evil 3 was like a combination of being on the streets and back in the police station again. But because Raccoon City got blown up at the end of Resident Evil 3, obviously you can't really have any more Resident Evil games in Raccoon City. And I think that's a real shame, because I feel like without Raccoon City, Resident Evil doesn't really have many legs to stand on.
Well, that's kind of a dumb thing to say. What, just because it takes place somewhere else, it doesn't feel like a Resident Evil game? Oh yeah, I guess Mario Galaxy isn't a real Mario game if it doesn't take place in the Mushroom Kingdom. Like, that's just really dumb logic. A game shouldn't be tied to a setting in order to feel like it's part of that franchise. I mean, this makes no sense. Is Halo Reach not a real Halo game if it doesn't take place on a Halo ring? Like, you could say that about any game, and that argument would just fall apart.
They basically just take the same concept of walking around in dark, scary buildings, but they've moved it now to a European village that is full of kind of farmer peasant people who seem to have some kind of infection, but they're not really like zombies. So they're still alive and they can talk, and they're like cognitive humans, and they've got some kind of worm things coming out of their bodies which gives them superhuman abilities. So they're infected with something. I guess it's not the T virus, because they're not the same zombies as you would expect from Resident Evil games. And I feel like Resident Evil without zombies is kind of like peanut butter without marmalade, if you know what I'm saying.
peanut butter without marmalade? That's the most British thing I've ever heard. But anyway, like Resident Evil without zombies doesn't feel like Resident Evil. I mean, are you serious? There's a lot of Resident Evil games without zombies, like Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil 8. I think the spin-offs don't have zombies. Maybe I'm wrong about that one. Correct me in the comments. But like, it doesn't need to have zombies to be Resident Evil. They can expand and be creative and do other things with the franchise, which clearly people are happy about because Resident Evil 4 is highly regarded as one of the best ones and a turning point for the franchise. So I feel like you're the minority on this one.
It doesn't really feel like the same kind of game when you take away the zombies. The whole point of Resident Evil is the fact that it's supposed to be about zombies.
No, it's usually supposed to be a survival horror game with resource management, puzzle solving, and combat. So I feel like you're just simplifying the franchise way too much, and frankly it's quite insulting to a video game franchise as important as Resident Evil. I mean, that would be like saying, oh, Doom, all you do is just shoot things, nothing to it. Like, it's not innovative, didn't do anything special, you just shoot things. When in reality, Doom paved the way for an entire genre that's pretty much the most popular genre of today, the FPS genre. And Resident Evil paved the way for survival horror, and is still going strong today.
And you're supposed to be trying to survive against zombies. Now, these technically aren't the same kind of zombies in the original Resident Evils, so I don't know what they were thinking with these kind of enemies, but I didn't really like fighting against them. I just felt like I was fighting against weird farmer, bearded peasant men in a village.
I mean, you are fighting peasant men in the village. Kind of part of the story, pretty important to it, and it's honestly more interesting to me than zombies. Like why are they insane? Why is there tentacles coming out of their face when you shoot them? You know, more engaging and mysterious than zombies. Personally, I think it would be more interesting than just the Resident Evil 2 storyline. But then again, I haven't played Resident Evil 4. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But at the surface level, it sounds more interesting, is what I'm saying. Plus, what do you expect them to do? Just remake the same 3 games over and over for Resident Evil, not expand or do anything creative? I mean, do you want to turn into a Call of Duty or something where they just remake the same stuff over and over with little to no changes every year?
And okay, it's not really that bad, I guess, as an enemy type, but it's just not as cool or interesting or even as scary as hordes of zombies trying to slowly shuffle their way towards you to eat you. These zombies in this game don't even try to eat you. When they attack you, they just use like farm tools, pitchforks and axes, or they'll just punch you. I've never known of a zombie trying to punch you. They would usually try to grab you and bite you. But these enemies in this game don't even try to bite you, so they're not even trying to eat you.
So because they don't try to eat you, the game is bad? Like, does that really matter? Like, and they're not really zombies if that's the case, which, as I said before, is perfectly fine if they want to do something different. Like, plus, are zombies really that engaging? Like, I feel like making 3 games out of them is already kind of a stretch, which I guess they managed to do. But if they made the entire franchise of Resident Evil just zombies and nothing else, then it would get stale very fast. And, I don't know, like, insane villagers that stab you and, you know, chase after you and just try to murder you for some reason that you don't know of yet. That sounds pretty cool to me. I don't know.
So in this game, instead of wandering around a creepy police station or a creepy mansion, you wander around kind of like the countryside and you go to villages. And you're walking around inside of these kind of like old looking houses and huts made by villagers. And it just doesn't really feel very scary, to be honest. I found Resident Evil 2 really scary because of the idea of a police station, which is supposed to be the safest sanctuary in a city full of policemen that are good people. And then the idea of being in a police station that's completely empty and abandoned and the policemen have fallen to the zombies was just really creepy, and the atmosphere was just very dark and disturbing.
I don't know. Judging by the gameplay I've seen of Resident Evil 4, it looks pretty dark, and the enemies look pretty disturbing, like if they're just insane villagers and they have tentacles coming out of their faces. So this seems pretty subjective. I mean, horror itself is a very subjective thing, so I feel like a lot of these arguments just don't hold up to an objective standard.
But in this game, wandering around these villages doesn't really feel the same. I don't really feel like the graphics of the game are that impressive for a game coming out in 2023.
Are you blind? That game looked amazing, truly breathtaking. Like, I have never seen visuals that good in a video game since like Dead Space Remake, which didn't even come out that long ago, I know, but still pretty impressive.
In fact, I would even say this game looks basically identical to Resident Evil 2.
I mean, it's using the same engine as Resident Evil 2 Remake, but this time it's on next-gen hardware, which, you know, of course it's going to look better. Plus, how could you say it looks identical to Resident Evil 2? It has a completely different art style and environment.
It's just Leon has a different kind of hairstyle, different color of hair. I don't know if it's because he's older now or maybe he dyed it, but he does look a bit more manly than he used to in Resident Evil 2. But apart from that, the game basically looks and feels the same as Resident Evil 2, the remake version. You've got your pistol, it's kind of shaky when you're shooting. It's kind of hard to get headshots because the aiming cursor wobbles around so much and the enemies kind of sway left to right. But the game, it doesn't really feel like it's breaking any new ground with the new graphics or anything or the gameplay.
Well, I mean, it's not going to break new ground with the gameplay because it's a remake. All it can really do is just refine what was already there in the original, which is perfectly fine. Not every game needs to be this huge, groundbreaking innovation, but you shouldn't really expect that from a remake at all. Unless if it's like maybe Final Fantasy VII Remake, where it's more of a reimagining than a remake.
It basically just feels like Resident Evil 2, but replaced the zombies with farmer peasant people. So I want to talk about the combat of Resident Evil 4 Remake. It's kind of weird and different compared to the other Resident Evil games.
Okay, not once in this video has he mentioned playing the original Resident Evil 4. He just keeps comparing it to Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes and Resident Evil 1 remake. Like, did he not play the original 4? Because from what I know of the series, Resident Evil 4 kind of made it more action focused, kind of revamped the combat, which I know people loved. So does he just have a problem with that? Because if your preference of Resident Evil is to be more horror focused and action, then okay, I get that. But to act like it's not a true Resident Evil game is a little strange.
Whereas in the original Resident Evil games, the combat was not really something that was very fancy or anything. It's just like you got a pistol, you got a knife for self-defense, maybe a shotgun. It was very bare bones and you weren't really supposed to be running around gunning everything down. But in this game, it feels like it's more action oriented. And for example, you'd have a horde of villagers coming at you and you're supposed to evade them or run away, or you can try to take them on. And the combat just feels kind of funny because it's like you're just mowing down these villagers, wandering slowly, walking slowly towards you, and then you're just spamming knife attacks at them.
Oh, you mean like the zombies in Resident Evil 2? Yeah, it's not a Resident Evil game though, right?
And doing fancy finishing moves with the F button. The game started to feel like a hack and slash melee game because I kept running out of bullets. I don't know why Leon is so stupid. He goes on like this mission to do something and he only brings like 10 bullets with him. He doesn't even bring a box of ammunition. You're supposed to pick them up as you defeat enemies or you just find them lying around. But you're constantly running out of ammunition, so you can shoot like 10 shots before you have to resort to the knife.
You mean like in almost every Resident Evil game ever? I mean, come on, you're literally describing the Resident Evil games you said you liked, but I'm starting to think you don't even like Resident Evil at this point. I mean, at the beginning of the video, you say you liked Resident Evil 2 and 3, but I honestly don't know if I can believe that anymore with how he's describing the remake of 4.
And the knife is just like you're hack and slashing and spamming it at the enemies. And if they attack you, you can do like a counter attack where you have to spam the F button. And it just feels like a kind of like a dumb hack and slash game at this point. And I felt like, wait, I thought this was supposed to be a horror game and not this hack and slash action game with a knife. Why didn't he bring a katana and just cut them all down if he's so good with the blade?
What? What the fuck?
Because Leon's not a weeb.
The combat feels very frustrating because you start getting surrounded by the villagers and the controls are kind of annoying. To try and get out of a mob of enemies, you kind of have to like backtrack and go against where the camera is pointing and you don't really know where you're facing. It's just kind of cumbersome. There's no rolling or jumping like Dark Souls games. You'd be able to just roll out of the way. There's no rolling.
Why would there be rolling in a Resident Evil game? This isn't Dark Souls. Why are you comparing it to Dark Souls now? This doesn't make any sense. Oh, this review is terrible. This is probably one of the worst reviews I've ever seen for a game. A game I haven't even played yet, and even I know this. Come on, I'm not even a fan of Resident Evil and I know this stuff.
You can't even block with your knife. So then later on in this village scene, if you decide to run away from the villagers, this guy with a massive chainsaw starts following you, and then basically you're just running around this village with this horde of dumb villagers walking to chase you. I don't know why they don't just run, they will just kind of walk towards you. I kind of lost interest in the game at this point because it just felt so silly. I'm running around this village, got this mob of angry villagers trying to chase me, and I'm thinking, what the hell happened to Resident Evil? This wasn't what the game used to be about. It used to be about being in a creepy building, getting spooked by maybe a few zombies that burst out of nowhere, being very stressed out because you don't really have many bullets or supplies or herbs to keep yourself alive. And this just feels silly. I don't know what I'm playing at this point.
You literally just said in one of the previous clips that you were constantly running out of ammo and you're constantly feeling stressed by all the enemies on screen and running out of ammo and having to use a knife or run away. That's literally what Resident Evil 2 is. Like, I don't know what you're expecting. You're contradicting yourself so much.
I just felt absolutely no fear, no scariness. The game's supposed to be a horror game, but you're in broad daylight outside in a village. It just doesn't really feel the same as being in a dark, dingy police station all alone. And you can hear like weird, scary sounds coming down from the corridor. The game just feels not scary, even though that's the whole point of Resident Evil games. From what I've played so far of the game and from what I've seen, I don't really feel like I can recommend this game, and I think I'm going to give this Resident Evil remake a skip and play something else. My final verdict of this game would be do not buy, and I would have to give it a score of 6.2 out of 10.
What's the point of the decimal? That's kind of dumb for a rating system. Just say 6 out of 10. Also, that's the end of this video, basically. There's like an extra 30 seconds, but it's literally just gameplay with silence, so I guess he forgot to cut that out. So yeah, top tier video here. But yeah, I guess this means Resident Evil 4 is just a terrible game, guys. Like, don't buy it, don't support it. Resident Evil is dead. Anyone who buys Resident Evil 4 doesn't know what they're doing. They're killing the franchise, man. It's just really sad to see. But anyways, I'll see you in the next video. Also, if I know I said constantly in this video that I'm not a fan of Resident Evil, but let's say if this video can get 50 likes, I will buy and stream Resident Evil 4 Remake on Twitch. So yeah, link to my Twitch channel in the description. See ya.